the-voice.com.
All right, let's dive right in. We're looking at a story that's playing out all over Connecticut, and it really gets down to one fundamental tension. Who gets to decide what our towns are going to look like in the future? We've got these two really different stories, and they show a real battle for local control that's heating up.
This quote right here, it just says it all, doesn't it? This is the core of the conflict. You've got the state capital, Hartford, seen as pushing this massive development agenda, concrete, and then you have local towns like Fairfield digging in their heels and pushing right back.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll set the stage, see why Connecticut's at this crossroads. Then we'll zoom in on two completely different situations: a campaign finance filing out of Bridgeport, and then the fight for local control happening in Fairfield. After that, we'll look at a pretty ambitious blueprint for change, and wrap it all up by asking, well, what's next?
Okay, Section 1, the struggle between state mandates and local voices. Right now, towns across the state are feeling this immense pressure from Hartford to build, build, build. And that is clashing, big time, with this really powerful desire for people to have the final say in their own communities.
And really, this isn't just about zoning regulations or how tall a building can be. It's so much bigger than that. What we're talking about is a classic struggle over who governs. I mean, who gets to write the next chapter for these towns? Is it the planners at the state level, or is it the folks who actually live there every single day?
So, let's pivot to our first case study, Section 2, a Bridgeport campaign filing. We're going to take a look at the mechanics of political money in Connecticut's biggest city, just to understand one side of this whole equation. So what we're looking at here are records filed with the State Elections Enforcement Commission, that's the SEEC, and this specific document lays out all the financial details for Bridgeport Mayor Joe Ganem's re-election campaign back in 2023. And yeah, that top-line number is pretty staggering. The campaign reported pulling in about $500,000. That gives you a real sense of the sheer scale of fundraising it takes to run for mayor in a major city these days. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The source material doesn't just report the facts. It describes this 300-page document as an eyebrow-raising laundry list. When you hear language like that, it tells you that the list of who donated was so long and so varied that it really made people stop and take a closer look.
So it kind of begs the question, right? What does a filing like this really tell us about how city politics works? You have to wonder, how does this level of fundraising, especially when it involves developers and other major interests, shape that top-down vision for a city's future? Keep that question in mind, because now we're going to look at a completely different approach.
And here we go. Section 3, Fairfield's fight for control. Talk about a total 180 from what we just saw. This isn't about big money and political machinery. This is a story about grassroots organizing, about a whole community pushing back.
At the heart of their fight is this thing called the CMDA. Now, according to the local activists we're citing, this is basically round 2 of a state housing bill they nicknamed the House of Cards, and they see it as a way for the state to just force a build-first mentality on them, basically rewriting their local rules from Hartford and cutting them out of the process.
And this lays out the two visions perfectly. On the one hand, you have the state mandates, which critics say just steamroll local input with a one-size-fits-all plan. And on the other hand, you've got the idea of local control, which is all about empowering community input and looking at what actually makes sense for a specific neighborhood.
And for the people in Fairfield, this is not just some philosophical debate. They have a whole list of very real concerns. We're talking about development being planned using flood maps from 2015 that they say are totally out of date. We're talking about historic neighborhoods literally being erased from official planning documents. They're even fighting an attempt to legally change their town into a city just to force more density on them. It's a lot.
And this gets to what they see as a really deep structural problem. The sources use this great analogy. Their town government is like a two-legged stool. It's got the executive branch, it's got the legislative branch, but it's missing that third leg, an independent judicial arm to provide any real accountability or checks and balances.
So that brings us to Section 4, a blueprint for change. Because this isn't just about saying no. The folks in Fairfield have put together this incredibly detailed, citizen-led plan for a totally different future. The document is actually called The Fixing of CT.
I mean, just listen to some of these chapter titles. The ambition here is just wow. They're not tinkering around the edges. They're talking about a new constitution for public utilities, about bringing back county-level government to empower local voices, a whole new vision for land use and jobs. This is thinking big.
And let's just grab one concrete idea from their plan: the People's Authority. The vision is to create a brand new, genuinely public utility just for Fairfield County. It would take over management of electricity, gas, and water, put it in local hands, and shoot for 100% sustainable energy by 2040. I mean, that's a direct challenge to the entire existing system.
Which leads us, finally, to our last section. Section 5. What is the future? After everything we've looked at, it's pretty clear that Connecticut is facing two very, very different paths forward.
So what it all boils down to is this choice. One path leads to a future shaped from the top down, driven by state mandates and big development money. The other path is one that's built from the ground up, one that's defined by local control, grassroots energy, and a vision that comes directly from the community itself.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. You know, this whole thing, it's not just a story about Bridgeport or Fairfield. It's about a fundamental question being asked in towns everywhere. So, I guess the real question for you is, what is the story of your town's future? And more importantly, who gets to write it?